One of the things that I found in my own life is that the more time I delegate to any given task, the more that I find that I'm successful at that task, that I pick things up quickly, or it seems to be like almost the luckier I get with that thing. And this is applicable to a wide variety of activities. It could be, for example, learning a language. It could be performance in school. It could be job hunting. It could be losing weight. The more time, the more effort we give to any of those things, for example, like our goals, the more successful we often are. One of the problems that I've seen in my own life, though, is that actually implementing this and finding time to give to those things is a lot harder than it looks. And I feel like this is the reason a lot of my New Year's resolutions often fail, is that I don't give them the time that it requires to actually, fulfill them and complete them. And that brings us to our topic today, which is scheduling. And so I want to look at this from a couple different points of view. So one, goal setting and scheduling from, a very broad perspective. We're talking anywhere from 6 months to 5 years out. And then getting a little bit more granular and looking at it on a day-to-day level. So when it comes to, your 6-year plans, your 1-year plans, your 5-year plans, for me, it all comes down to goals. And I'm not going to talk about goal setting a whole lot in this video. So I'm going to assume that you have some goals or something that you want to accomplish in the near future. Like I said, anywhere from 6 months to 5 years out. Once you have the goal picked out, the process that I follow is pretty simple. All I do is I break things down, getting more and more granular, more and more specific each time until I figure out what can I do today in order to accomplish that goal 6 months, a year from now, whatever it may be. So for example, what this looks like, one of my goals this year was I wanted to read 30 books. I really enjoy reading. I often find that I don't have the time to read, or I don't read as many books as I would like to. But when I started this year, I said to myself, I really want to read at least 30 books this year. Now, instead of waiting until, 6 months from now or 11 months from now and saying, oh shoot, I need to read 30 books in the next 2 weeks. What I've tried to do is figure out what can I do now in order to make sure that I hit that goal a year from now. So what I've done is I've taken that goal of reading 30 books in a year and I've reduced it by a little bit, right? I'm trying to figure out what can I do on a day-to-day basis. Some of the ways that I've broken this goal down are figuring out, what are the books that I actually want to read. One thing that keeps me from meeting this goal is I don't really know what I want to read until I have it in my hands. And so I need to do some research beforehand and figure out what is it that I actually want to read. So when it comes to reading that book and sitting down to read that book, I already know in my mind, oh, this was the one that comes next, right? I'm reading this book right now, I'll read this book next week, whatever it might be. So now I've picked my goal, I've gotten a little more specific, tried to overcome some of the obstacles that might stand between me and actually accomplishing that goal. And then when it comes to today, I need to figure out what is it that I do today in order to make sure I hit that goal. So that might be, I need to make sure that I read 30 minutes today and every day for the next X amount of days in order to hit that goal a year from now. Another example is I really want to go to a good graduate school to get my MBA. That means I need to prep for a variety of standardized tests, the GRE and the GMAT. I need to talk to people who have been to schools like the ones I want to go to in order to know more about their application process. There's a whole list of things that I need to do in order to be prepared to meet that goal. And as I keep reducing that goal down into small actionable items that I can do, I find that, okay, today I need to order my 2 textbooks. I need to order a GRE textbook. I need to order a GMAT textbook in order to prep for that test. Tomorrow, I'll need to study for 30 minutes on this topic and 30 minutes on this topic in order to be prepped for that. 3 days from now, I need to take this practice test and this practice test. And you see, that's how the process goes. Is I start with this big goal and we just keep reducing it down into more and more specific things until you figure out what is it that you can do today. And the reason I do this is I found that oftentimes when we set goals, especially New Year's resolutions, right? Because that was only a month ago. When we set goals, they're often really grand and really big, which is great. But if you don't have any, actionable plan behind them, or if you don't know what you need to do, then they're really just, dreams, right? They're never really going to happen because you don't have any action to put behind them. And so if there's one thing that I would take out of this video, it's that goal setting is great, but when you set your goal, you need to figure out what are the actionable items that you can do, whether that's on a monthly basis or on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. What are the things that you are going to do in order to actually meet that goal? So you can imagine, this whole process is sort of a funnel where we have the big goal at the top and we're slowly getting more and more specific until we narrow down into, our daily action item for today. And that brings us to daily planning. How do you schedule out your day? How do you schedule out your week? What do we do so we can be most effective with our time? I wanted to bring up an example that I've heard a lot of different times in a lot of different places, and you might be familiar with it. It's this analogy of the rocks in the sand. So if you can imagine your day as like a mason jar, and then you imagine, your big tasks, whether that be like going to work, dropping kids off at something. For me, it's going to school. Those are like your rocks. Those are things that are set in your schedule. They occur every week. You have to do them at the same time. Those are like the big ticket items. On the other side, we have sand. Sand is like the little things that you need to do in order to accomplish your goal. So for me, reading my 30 books this year, that 30 minutes of reading, I know that needs to happen at some time during the day, but I don't know when, right? That's kind of like my sand. It's a variable, there's no set time for when that needs to happen. When you are going about planning your day, if you try and do all the sand first, oftentimes you'll find that you don't have enough time to be good at your rocks. Right? So I don't have enough time to perform well at school. I don't have enough time to do X, Y, Z, whatever it might be. So what you should do is instead plan all of these little things around the spaces left by your big ticket items, right? So if I know that I, for example, have class from 9 to noon, which I don't, but let's say that I do have class from 9 to noon, and I know I have a 15-minute break in between those. I also have like an hour commute before and an hour commute after. I need to figure out how can I take advantage of the time around that block in order to check some of these things off my list. So for example, if I know I need to read 30 minutes and I need to study 30 minutes for the GRE, GMAT, whatever, I know I can read 15 minutes during that break in between my two classes. I know that while I'm on the train to school, I can have some practice tests out for the GRE and study on my way while I'm on the train. And so what you can do is break your day down in this sort of manner where what are the big things you need to do and what are the holes in your schedule that you can fill with these smaller things. Keep in mind a couple really important principles is that you don't need to have dedicated time in order to accomplish these smaller things most of the time. So for example, I don't need to have 30 minutes straight for me to block out my 30 minutes of reading. I could do 15 minutes here and I could do 15 minutes somewhere else and I still hit that goal. If you're learning a language and you want to study for an hour, what if you did 20 minutes in the morning? What if you did 5 minutes while you're in the shower? Or what if you did, every time you went to the bathroom, you did X amount of something, flashcards, whatever it might be. You'll find that you take advantage of your time a lot more and you're able to cross more of those things off of your list when you can find those little gaps. So what I like to do for my weekly and daily planning is actually on Saturday or Sunday, I'll plan out what I have going on for the next week. So I know I have class from this time to this time. I know I have meetings on this day and this day. I know I have this thing for my club that I need to be at. And then I'll make sure all of those things are in my schedule. Then I wait until that day comes up in the morning when I get up, 6:30 or 7 o'clock. I will go into my Google Calendar and I'll figure out what can I check off from my list of little to-dos, for example, reading, studying, homework, anything like that. Where can I put those in my day in order that every time I go somewhere, every time I have downtime, I have something to do. Of course, I save time for, meals and stuff like that. And I take I don't go working until 11 p.m. at night or anything like that, or 1 a.m. in the morning doing stuff. I try to, give myself a limit and find that I try and still give myself breaks and stuff like that. But really try and find these little places where you can plug in things from your to-do list. And so really roughly, that's how I go about all of my planning. And I found that this has been super effective for me as a student. Granted, I don't have, the biggest list of responsibilities, but I do have a lot of stuff to do. And I've really found that this has helped me to manage my time a little more wisely. Now, a couple last things I wanted to throw at the end of the video. These are almost like red flags. So if you find that you're doing these, I would try and stop immediately. Because there's only 24 hours in a day and we spend, almost half of that asleep or eating or anything like that, you really need to be smart with how you're working and not just work super hard all the time. And I guess that was probably a bad way to phrase that. What I mean is you need to learn how to work smarter and not harder. So for example, learning a language. In my experience learning a language and teaching people to learn a language, I found that a lot of people spend most of their time doing flashcards and things like Duolingo. Not that those things are bad, but you do not get a lot of return on your investment when it comes to learning a language if all you're doing is flashcards and Duolingo. And I'm totally speaking from my experience. What I found to be more effective is trying to speak, whether that be picking some random topic, right? Just Google 100 topics to talk about. And then I spend 15 minutes trying to talk about that topic in the language that I'm learning. Or maybe it's messaging people that speak that language on Facebook and asking them if I can practice with them and texting them. It could be reading a book and trying to, digest and really understand what's happening in the dialogue. I found that gives me way more return for my effort and my time than flashcards or Duolingo. And so what I would do is during the day, if I know that I want to learn this language, by the end of the year, or, be fluent 2 years from now, whatever it might be, I would delegate more and spend more of my time doing those things than doing, flashcards and whatever it might be. And I get it, flashcards and Duolingo are super easy, they're super accessible, but I will stand by my argument and say that you don't get a lot out of them, and you will get a lot more out of speaking than you will those things. And so you'll find little almost hacks like that in a lot of the things that you do. And so I would just take a little, make a little list of the things that you do during the day. How do you do them? Are there any ways that you could, optimize what you're doing? Are there any places you could work smarter and not harder? The next thing I would bring up is context switching. This is just when you're switching from, task to task to task. And obviously you're going to do a lot of different things during your day. So switching from a task to a task isn't bad, but you really want to minimize the amount of time that you spend doing this. Context switching is very expensive for your brain in the sense that it's very, there's a lot of cognitive stress, and it's very tiring for your brain. It requires a lot of energy to successfully switch from one task to another. Even though we don't feel like it, it's very taxing for your brain. And so really try and spend as much time with a task as you can until you're ready to move on to something else. Don't spend 10 minutes on this and then 10 minutes on this and then 10 minutes on that. Really try and block things out. I like to do at least 1 hour blocks for any given task, and then I'll move to another one. You can also look into things like the Pomodoro method, where you do 20 to 30 minutes to 40 minutes on with a 5-minute break, and then you just cycle back and forth and do time on, break, time on, break, time on, break, things like that, just to keep you focused and really in sync with what you're doing. The last thing I would bring up is figure out when your creative or productive hours are. So for some people, they find, from 12 a.m. to 3 a.m., they are just, all the ideas are coming to them. They are super effective. That's not me, that might be you. But if you know when you are most effective, when you're most creative, I would try and structure some of your day around that time to take advantage of it. So for me, that's in the morning. I like to get up 6:37, and from 7 to 10, those are my best hours when I feel like I'm super locked in, I'm super focused. And again, for you, that might be a different time. It could be, 12 to 3, it could be, 1 a.m. to 4 a.m., whatever it might be. But figure out when those hours are for you, because I promise you probably have them times when you're more focused than in other times of the day. Figure out when they are and really take advantage of them. And that's it. That's a brief breakdown of how I, plan my day, how I plan to accomplish my goals, and how I take advantage of my time during the day. I hope it helped.